There are four ways to influence a decision, but whose interests are being served? Psychologically, there's a lot going on beneath the surface of a sale. There are factors that affect the buying decisions, and these have been transformed into well-documented and researched selling tactics. These external factors are often used to manipulate the buyer. But once you're aware of them, it's up to you what you do with them. You could use them to coerce someone into a sale, or you could use them in the buyer's interests. If you believe the volume of your sales is most important, then maybe this coercion isn't so problematic. But if your work requires you to build a relationship with each client, and for them to invest in the work that you do together, it may be best if they don't feel pressured into making that commitment later on. So, what are these factors or methodologies that can influence people's decisions? I'm Simon Batchelor, and in this video I'll explain what these four factors are so that you can make an informed decision about how you might use them or choose to avoid them altogether. Let's start with heuristics. Heuristics are cognitive shortcuts our brains use when they're making decisions. Another way to describe them is they're assumptions we make without even really realizing, and these assumptions can be used to lead us to one decision over another. Here are four examples of these heuristics. Single option aversion. Have you ever noticed that it can be hard to make a decision when there's only one option? That is single option aversion. We instinctively see more risk and struggle to see value without a comparison. In purchase terms, this means that only having one option can result in no sale because we're just not sure. But if we show a few alternatives, we're more likely to pick one. Asymmetric dominance effect. Choosing between two very different or complex options can be challenging. One way to influence that decision is to introduce a third option that is clearly inferior to one of the other two options. This is also called the decoy effect. Now the result is that more dominant option becomes far more attractive due to the introduction of the decoy. Likability bias. This is also known as the halo effect. Likability bias is what happens when our overall impression of a person, company or brand influences our feelings and thoughts about them. We're no longer thinking so much about that service or product option on offer. Instead, it's a question of how much we like the person, the company or the brand that is presenting them to us. In manipulative marketing terms, this is trying to make someone like you in order to influence the sale. Social proof. This can be a powerful influence on our decisions and behaviour, and basically comes down to how others react to the offer. There's less perceived risk in buying something new if other people seem to like it or endorse it. This is often called the power of the crowd, and is especially powerful when that crowd is made up of people like us. So far, this might all sound like a toolkit for mega sales figures, especially if you don't mind manipulating the buyer to make that sale. However, the effect of using these heuristics doesn't actually last very long, so although they seem tempting, the actual long-lasting effects of them are minimal. They might last long enough to make the sale, but with a bit of conscious thought and reflection, the buyer will often see through them. So if you use these heuristic factors to drive the sale, the client is more likely to suffer from buyer's remorse at some later point. And that's likely to be a problem if you're engaged in relationship-dependent work with the client. It is evident that these external influences are potent motivators for human behaviour, and they are a large part of the buying process. Like any tool or knowledge, they can be used for good or bad to help the buyer make the best decision for them, or just to manipulate more sales for you. It's all about how you apply them in your marketing and your interactions with potential clients. One way of looking at these instead of manipulation is to flip your perspective. So instead of seeing marketing as selling a product that you want to sell, we see it as selling a product that the client wants to buy. As Seth Godin says, if they knew what you know, would they still buy what you're selling? And this is a great way of reframing the marketing process and how you go about selling. Those heuristics are still playing a part in the decision, but you can know that you aim to market more ethically. By not allowing or introducing restrictive choices, decoys, personal charisma or social pressure to convince clients to buy what they don't need or want. For example, single option aversion means it's easier to decide when there's a choice. So, by offering a choice, you are being helpful. But those choices should all be potentially genuinely helpful or desirable to the client, thus avoiding the decoy effect. The buyer's choice can then depend on what option actually meets their needs best, as opposed to being psychologically pushed in the direction of the seller's choice, which is probably the most expensive. The basic principle of more ethical marketing is that you should stop and consider how you are presenting your offer from the buyer's point of view. Now, you might be thinking, but look, if all these tactics work, surely I can use them to sell loads. And yes, I agree, they do work. In fact, they work very well. But if you're selling the process of working together over time, then ask yourself whether using these tactics fosters in the new client the commitment to that process. If you need someone to show up for weeks or months and do the work needed for that process to succeed, what happens when they start to feel manipulated into saying yes in the first place? Isn't it better to work with someone who sees the value and relevance of what you're offering from the beginning? In fact, there are many big brands themselves that are starting to realise that a lot of these tricks and heuristics don't actually result in long-term customer satisfaction and retention. A great example is Lego stores. The people in the Lego store aren't trying to sell you Lego. They just want to get you excited about it, and if you happen to buy your bricks later on from another shop or from Amazon, they don't mind. The same is true with Apple Store. The in-store strategy is just to show you the products and ask you about what you want to achieve, and then show you some of the ways in which their products might help. Often, the actual purchasing process comes later and is handled by a completely different person than showed you the product and talked you through how it might help you. So you can use these heuristic factors to make a lot of sales, or you can use them to help people make a good decision that they'll be happy with. As long as you're considering why the buyer is making the purchase decision and can truthfully say that they would still buy if they knew what you know, then I believe your marketing will be more ethical. If you want to learn more about who it is you want to work with, how you can design a product they really want to buy, and then how you can market it more ethically, then do check out my book, Reframing Marketing. It's a 3-step guide to creating an effective and ethical marketing plan that doesn't rely on manipulative tactics to make the sale. You can learn more about the book and order your copy at reframingmarketing.com. I'll see you in the next video.